to 18-20-13. Khadija bint Khuwaylid. Ibn Kathir, the Islamic scholar and commentator on the Quran, writes in his book Wives of the Prophet Muhammad. Khadija had been the first to publicly accept Muhammad as the messenger of Allah, and she had never stopped doing all she could to help him. Love and mercy had grown between them, increasing in quality and depth as the years passed by. Not even death could take this love away. Muhammad never stopped loving Khadija, and although he married several more wives in later years and loved them all equally, it is clear that Khadija always had a special place in his heart. Indeed, whenever Aisha, his third wife, heard Muhammad speak of Khadija, or saw him sending food to Khadija's old friends and relatives, she could not help feeling jealous of her because of the love that Muhammad still had for her. Once Aisha asked him if Khadija had been the only woman worthy of his love. Muhammad replied, "She believed in me when no one else did. She accepted Islam when people rejected me, and she helped and comforted me when there was no one else to lend me a helping hand." It had been related by Abu Hurairah that on one occasion, when Khadija was still alive, Jibril came to Muhammad and said, "O Messenger of Allah, Khadija is just coming with a bowl of soup or food or drink for you. When she comes to you, give her greetings of peace from her Lord and from me, and give her the good news of a palace of jewels in the garden, where there will be neither any noise nor any tiredness." After Muhammad's uncle Abu Talib and his first wife Khadija had both died in the same year, Muhammad and his small community of believers endured a time of great hardship and persecution at the hands of the Quraysh. Indeed, Muhammad, who was now 50 years old, named this year the Year of Sorrow, February 18, 2013. 3:1-20-13. The 10 punishments of the afterlife. 1. The punishment of the farewell. 2. The punishment of the samurai. 3. The punishment of the negroid. 4. The punishment of the sexuality. 5. The punishment of the hammers. 6. The punishment of the curses. 7. The punishment of the arachnids. 8. The punishment of the violence. 9. The punishment of her voice. 10. The punishment of his voice. 1. Deceases. His entrance into the courtroom. The judge omnipotent. The jury, every one of the guardianship that was practicable of him, that was of the good guardianship, that was of the bad guardianship, that was known as his father, that was known as his mother, that was known as his brothers, that was known as his sister, that was known as his companionships, that was known as his comradeships, and as his intellectual stimulation, and that was known as his friendships, and that was known as his known animals, and so on and so forth. The sentence of his complete and total condemnation given to him by the judge omnipotent. The good guardianship weeps for him, of complete and total helplessness of and mercifulness for him, that is, of his father, of his brother primal, of his one best companionship, of particulars of his friendships, of his known animals. The bad guardianship jeers for him, of complete and total abolishment of and mercilessness for him. To his subsequent punishments, his complete and total tearfulness and fearfulness plead for mercifulness, though complete and total helplessness and impotence. His formal entrance into the afterlife. 2. Bushido blade, samurai. Extreme, incomprehensible, ireful severity, immediate and personal, slashes and cuts, swift and sharp violence and mutilation, revelation of the true purpose of Viet Cong, and so forth, and so on and so forth, repeats and endures eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. 3. Interrogation room. Entrance of imposing stature, of Ice Cube or of another thug or inveterate hater, despiser of him, similarly identifiable. Initially somewhat merciful, though eventually such composure deteriorates, and every conceivable understanding of his rumored and hushed nature becomes revealed, and increasing further ever the more so exponentially. Violent rape and sodomization, violent molestation, sexual violence and castration, and so on and so forth, repeats and endures eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. 4. Arena, sizable, every one of the guardianship that was predicable of him, that was known of him, the good guardianship, the bad guardianship, are as the audience. Every record of every impermissible and deviant sexual act of him is revealed before the audience. The center of the arena, the excrement of Satan himself, piles down over and onto him, and so on and so forth. Repeats and endures eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. 5. Room of complete darkness and of redness also. Thoughts of everything and thoughts of everywhere. Logic and syllogisms of everything, logic and syllogisms of everywhere. Disturbance, perfect and infallible manifestation of such, and increasing further ever the more so exponentially. Madness increasing further ever the more so exponentially. Noise, blows of hammers, claps of thunder, slams of doors, shuts of wrath, shouts of wrath, and so on and so forth. Repeats and endures eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. 6. Room of complete darkness and of redness also. The nature of the punishment of the curse is essentially identifiable with that of the nature of the punishment of the hammers, though instead of the hammers and so forth, the noise predication is that of the curses, in relativity to that was known of him. Repeats and endures eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. 7. Grey and steel room. Outside, sudden screeching is heard. Inside, an imposing black, yellow, and red arachnid, predicable to what was known as the tarantula, is followed by innumerable quantity of more inferior spiders. The entrance of such into the room. The room is then spun completely of their webbing. He is at the center of the room. The imposing black, yellow, and red arachnid then rests itself with its essentially lifeless and inanimate eyes immediately in front of him, essentially for the duration of his eternity, and so on and so forth. Repeats and endures eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. 8. He re-encounters and relives the beating of his foremost primary companion, though her form itself is obscure and inconceivable, and though his mercy for her is stronger than ever was imaginable. The punishment continues essentially for the duration of his eternity, without capability to stop this at all whatsoever. Her own blood splatters onto the walls. "What are you doing?" is heard and repeats eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. The immediate aftermath of the experience repeats and endures eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. Her panicked hyperventilation of complete and total helplessness of and mercifulness for him, together with him alone in the room, it repeats and endures eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. 9. His one best companionship is calling out his name, trying to reach him, trying to help him, trying to save him. Repeats and endures eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. 10. His one best relationship, his father, is calling out his name, trying to reach him, trying to help him, trying to save him. When he was a very young child, as though, "Awaken, my son, come back to me, my son." March 1, 2013. 3/7/2013. Brief note in relativity to the formal organon. 1 north, 2 east, 3 west, 4 south. 1 north, substantival category 1, substance north, plus adjectival category 2, quality south. 2 east, adjectival category 3, quantity north, plus adjectival category 5, activity south. 3 west, adjectival category 4, relativity north, plus adjectival category 6, passivity south. 4 south, adjectival category 7, positivity north, plus adjectival category 8, durability south. From substantival category 1, substance, to adjectival category 2, quality, to adjectival category 3, quantity, to adjectival category 4, relativity, to adjectival category 5, activity, to adjectival category 6, passivity, to adjectival category 7, positivity, to adjectival category 8, durability. 1 north, what X is it? 2 east, how X is it? 3 west, what X does it? 4 south, where X does it, plus when X does it. Substantival category 1, substantival category substance 1, foremost formal cause spatiality. Adjectival category 2, quality, ultimate formal cause spatiality. Adjectival category 3, quantity, Foremost material cause, causation. Adjectival category 4, relativity. Foremost efficient cause, temporality. Adjectival category 5, activity. Ultimate material cause, causation. Adjectival category 6, passivity. Ultimate efficient cause, temporality. Adjectival category 7, positivity. Foremost final cause, resolution. Adjectival category 8, durability. Ultimate final cause, resolution. March 7, 2013. Three 12/2013. The ultimate punishment of the afterlife. The day of mine today was ultimately truly bleak, truly terrible, bleak, sterile, but that is truly empty, without promise of hardly any thought, much affirmative at all. I reason that there is almost everything a part of my life that is aimed at in the direction of the greatest darkness. Rather than such, this is in fact during this point in my time by now, understandable as references and significations of what the afterlife of mine is in fact going to have been. That is again aforementioned above, truly terrible, bleak, sterile, truly empty and without promise, and so forth. I have found essentially revealed and discovered by now that this ultimate punishment of mine in the afterlife is to have been the complete and total encapsulation of my form, substance in absolute zero temperature ice, the form twisted and distorted in all conceivable positions and directions, and this is so eternally, everlastingly, indefinitely. There is to be starvation a part of this ice encapsulation punishment, suffocation a part of this, and truest burns as well because of the severity of the coldness of the ice, as well as the inability to move at all and rest at all whatsoever from the punishment. Neither the privilege to see. The ice imprisonment is foremost probably in absolute darkness, as well as the complete and total isolation from any conceivable and actualizable soul a part of this particular specific punishment, and all components of this punishment takes place again eternally, everlastingly, and indefinitely, and so forth. This punishment of mine in the afterlife sounds perfectly sensible to occur to me by this point in my time. There are these premonitions that this essentially is going to happen and going to occur to me during then in the ultimate substantiation of mine within the subsequent afterlife. Premonitions of such, known, seen everywhere, always by now, and from this point in my time on, found as such revealed and discovered by my own understanding and comprehension, while still here a part of this prelude of what is ultimately to have become of me, and this inevitably so, as completely formally imprisoned and completely formally denied of the heart and of efficient cause sentimentality. The predestination of mine into this particular specific end was of course inevitable and unalterable. The self-evolution of mine clearly so was not to have been strong enough in order to transcend everything predicable to this generation of mine, nor to this physique of mine, nor to this intellect of mine, nor to this identity of mine. Now the guardianship has been fallen into irreconcilable hopelessness of me. Each and every cry and every prayer of mine, having been sent to the up above, is no longer heard by the up above, or even received from the up above. I have this reasoning within me, and I have sensed this as of very lately, that the Almighty is in fact still essentially quite uncertain of what to do with me after the life of mine, that somehow, if ever I'm still capable to truly have repented, and to have redeemed, to have purified myself wholly enough, so as not to condemn myself into the eternal, everlasting, indefinite lamentation of such punishment aforementioned above, and as well from each and every one of the variable punishments of mine, and infinitely more inconceivable and incomprehensible to me, as to what the substantiation, the quality, and so forth of them are in fact going to have been, then I must somehow reconcile, redeem myself with my Walker Nair mother, so-called quote-unquote mother beforehand, if ever I were to die of the substance of mine and to perish of such sometime sooner enough. I'm still capable to contact her over on the internet. If she herself were in fact to perish sometimes very soon, that is beforehand, were I not to reconcile and redeem myself with her, that with complete and absolute certainty I am foremost actually, after the transition into the subsequent afterlife of mine, going to have endured the eternal, everlasting, indefinite lamentation, the punishments as such of mine, and foremost especially so the particular specific punishment of mine of the ice encapsulation, and with this punishment altogether the accompanied attributes and predicates so a part of it, the ice encapsulation punishment already aforementioned above. I have even so considered to attempt the repentance and redemption of my very own soul with that of the foremost primary companionship of mine, which such is of course that of Eden, such is foremost secondary to do for the time being. Somehow, some foremost self-volition of mine is to have been gone and denied formally and truly so by the omnibenevolent creatorship of the omniscient up above. And this foremost self-volition as such is clearly and strongly a part of the anima archetype of mine, especially so here that of my very own real and actual walker, Nair, so-called quote-quote mother, and secondarily so that of Eden. Somehow I must redeem myself through them and then open the gateway from the up above authentically and legitimately once again in order to commence authentic and legitimately heard, received repentance, if ever beforehand, with salvation and the penitence in the divine grace for the omniscient up above, not to have been judged of and accounted of. Ultimately so as too late or beyond the opportunity or beyond the capability to still have done so, and as such, to Frigg, please, my dear, please do wish me feel well. Please do wish me a good night tonight as well, too. I miss these words, hearing them from some woman of mine of the past. Please do pray for me and always, and do wish for my very own final salvation, such as you may know so as well, too. I'm not going to surrender to the down below. I'm never going to surrender to the down below, never so, and into the very infinitesimal transcendentality of the foremost formative and generative up above. For now, Frigg, your golden sunshine fullness to me is full of warmth and cheerfulness. I shall return to you in some time to come, my queen, my anima, my echo. March 11, 2013. 3/17/2013. Letters 2. There's ultimately a quite essentially true, in every sense, moral, definitive message attributable to the topical subject matter, worthy and affirming of others like-minded with similar interests, and as well as of a brave, valorous, and very strong reaction in relativity to the efficient and final, commensurate and universal poison, the ethanol, the waste, the parasitism of essentially most every other identifiable natural subject Westerner, predicable to the now very late final division apart of recorded human civilization, the beginning and the end attributable to the third millennium darkness, forsakenness, condemnation, the complete and total annihilation of formal animate substance, the marks embedded evil, viciousness, nuclear assault, godlessness, and terminal affliction of typical emulative states, such as of archetypal Soviet Union, particularly so in question the inhuman, accursed state of North Korea, February 16, 2013. The instant that I had read of, and last night I suffered a degree of giddiness and delirium. I had become immediately so very concerned of her. In fact, during the immediate instant itself, I had then experienced a quite strong onset of tears, extreme sympathy, and remorsefulness, and so forth for her. I have felt rather sick to my own self since I have learned of the since rather extreme sickness of her own condition. I feel so very helpless and so far away from her, especially now. So, now during this incident, I had even looked up, I'm in truth serious of this, round-trip plane tickets to her vicinity for at most a week, wherever her condition now, or if during some time in the still to come, God forbid of this always and absolutely, to have diminished exceedingly, that she was to have become hospitalized, or was to have then been living out the finality of her days. For such living out the finality of one's days does happen to anybody, really. The potentiality of this was, if ever it were to occur to her. Indeed, at least I would myself try everything in my most true capability to have acquired the blessing and the grace to have seen her in person, if ever she herself was to have been living out the finality of her days, that I would otherwise never hear or see from her in this life manifestation of mine ever more again. I too am quite afflicted with physical sickness since as of yesterday. I have been coughing quite more prevalently, and have been feeling quite under the weather myself. I am truly to have been sick along with her. I am right by her side here as accordingly of this incident as well. I have some quite final news concerning Condemned having been come up since as of earlier today. This is good news, really, though I must save this, but only for the time being, as I'm rather worn out in the meantime. I must eat some food, then shower. Food itself I quite strongly desire at the moment. I haven't eaten anything, or drank anything neither, since well over 16 hours by now. I tend to seemingly transcend enough for most, or at least of much of my own physical bodily condition quite strongly and abundantly as of lately. Ultimately, this is not desirable to affirm of this fast-like behavior of mine. This is strongly so, for this behavior to have been rather non sophra sine, inharmonious with the naturality and the equanimity of the physical bodily condition, of appetition and strength of volition. Also, my Kopecki Nair father has replied back to me concerning the question of the acquisition of mine of the piano from his place. This permissiveness of his is indeed to have been affirmative. Now I must simply find some means to have the piano delivered to the property. The van of his to fit the piano within it is for now still questionable to him. He must measure the length, the width, the height of the piano in proportion to the appropriate measurement of his van for the time being. February 17, 2013. The place of mine is to myself for the next 2 or so weeks at least, and this is with certainty. And the place has been to myself since the later afternoon as of yesterday. I am alone again at last. Such peacefulness and calm. Condemned had told to me then that he will for certain have been moved away permanently from the place by at most the end of the next month of March. Now this is confirmed as absolutely so. He had mentioned of remorsefulness and apologetic sympatheticness over to me quite commonly during his earlier discussion with me from yesterday. He is quite clearly sorry for having been irritable and difficult to you over all this time, Odin. At least this phrase itself in particular is such that I have sensed and imagined from some of his own sentimentality to me during that final, quite friendly, transformed enough conversation that I had earlier had with him from earlier yesterday. My own situation concerning afterward his move away is by now rather questionable to me. I do not know with absolute certainty any more that whether I will do private piano instruction or not. To do this clearly so requires some specific instruction, relative attribution, that of which I myself simply do not inherit within me as of right now, nor very probably any time very soon enough. Though again I shall see about this, of such that is going to become of this question, still within another month or so. This is a very obscure situation that I have come to be within as of lately. The night of mine tonight was the first night to myself since essentially 1 week, more or less, prior to the last year Christmas holiday. Even so, the first night here alone to myself was still quite strange and obscure enough, that is such that some sudden strangeness that overcomes some part predicable to the cabin itself, especially so during the 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock hours of the morning. Simply so, now I am determined to remain awake whenever I can, specifically so during the dark twilight hours, and to sleep during the light daylight hours. For then, otherwise, I am alert and awake during the dark twilight, the more fearful of the hours. The lights in the room may, with legitimate reason, remain on, as well as the television and the computer. The shadow types then keep enough distance from me. During the day itself, there is essentially no fearfulness apart of me from the haunting shadow types. Regardless, I may during such time and sleep and relax with the foremost ease and simplicity. February 18, 2013. Both the internet and the television, along with the telephone altogether, were at the time understandably cancelled of their services at the place, for that Condemned is hurting for money quite severely as of lately. So that I had woken up during the mid-afternoon early hours today with no television service, no internet service, neither telephone service, essentially totally alone at the place day and night. I had, of course, then immediately driven down the mountain to the Charter Communications office, and then there I had then put the entire 3 services by now in my own name. The monthly bill of the 3 services altogether now under my own responsibility from this point on. Quite expensive this is, though surprisingly still affordable enough to me even within my own current financial situation. Though while at the office I was there rather late enough in the day, therefore I was told from the woman worker while there that the latest the serviceman was next available to switch on again the 3 services was during the next day, that is, during Tuesday at around 2 to 4 in the afternoon. The serviceman was to have been expected at the place to do this task of his. The tedium from the ordinance day until earlier yesterday, Tuesday, at around 4 in the afternoon, was quite severely unbearable. I was so solitary and alone, it was very incomprehensible to other commoners and ordinary socialite secured and sufficient enough human source comfort found in persons. The duration of this essentially true and ever since the term solitude did indeed endure over the length of the day, though ultimately so, the strongly recurrent condition of my own is further ever the more inconceivable to me. I am in severe physical pain right now. I am trying the best that I can to write right now. The pain here is the pain is here practical to severe chest pain. I just wish to write, then lie down and rest immediately after this. But I must have finished the above description of my time away since your stay. This is that essentially during the complete solitude and total isolation of my experience, I then pulled through together the first primary voice recordings of the first complete book of mine, The Birth of the Fool 1. That is, ultimately I had ended up recording voice recitations of the book of up to, I believe it was 102 pages in one singular stretch. I had even broken down in the initial tears during around the beginning minutes into calm upon the open surf. A part of the sheer beauty of the words, the passages of the book I had found of them to have been spoken and heard out aloud by myself for essentially the first time in such a truly legitimate and most primary sentimental midnight twilight atmosphere during the specific experience of the then complete and total solitude and human isolation of mine, as well as was practical to the true and every sense of maturity of the state of my own, as this was to have then been by and up to the division of time. As well too, I'm eventually going to try determinedly to record the entirety of the complete book of The Birth of the Fool 1, as well as the entirety of the complete second book, The Birth of the Fool 2. And specifically, this is probably going to have been, after condemned, is to have then been moved away permanently. The intimate, solitary, commensurate, universal, personal atmosphere of the place during the particular time will have been truly perfect and desirable to affirm of it. The completion of this task by then, and is foremost so. February 20, 2013. The television I can truly do without it, were there then to have been a life companion of mine own, really so, freely so, actually so, at last granted to me once again, and acquired mercifully and blessedly to me, by the grace and the kindness of the holiness of heaven revealed to me from the above. February 21, 2013. Indeed, the chest pains have gone from me physically so, I'm not having been afflicted with any severe or any moderate pain. At least not at all right now. Thankfully, and most appreciatively so. I'm well fed and watered as well, though not sunny and upbeat, unfortunately, as this is forever understandable to me, though not severely antithetical to such aforementioned description right now either. There's been a snowstorm during Tuesday and Odin's Day. This was a quite heavy one this time, at least so in relativity to the customary amount of snow typically experienced within the specific town. This time up to 8 to 12 inches, I believe the snowfall was to have been. It would be very difficult to drive otherwise in the town for the time being, and for some couple of days to come, and my car itself will require some more than a moderate amount of work to unbury it from the snow, as well as to unbury the snow off the road in front of it, just enough to get my car past the driveway, and then onto the already snow-plowed neighborhood roads, though the roads themselves are for now still to have been rather risky to drive upon them, especially so were the car and the owner not to use tire chains or cables. I did not use tire chains or cables. I recall the very severe difficulty, as it were, of putting them on. Particularly so the incident I recall from during the trip with my foremost companion Eden up to Lake Tahoe during March of 2009. Otherwise a most memorable and deeply spiritual experience for the most part, though the putting on the car of hers, the tire chains out in the snow in the middle of the very austere, very cold and desolate Tahoe pine forest and mountains, doing this for the first time as well. Ever since then, afterward, I tend to shun away from the concept of tire chains or cables altogether, and always. I did enjoy having gotten to learn of the foremost originative conception of the term charter. Even so, I had looked up online in Encyclopedia article in attribution to to the specific understood term, simply so to understand more of its particular essential nature in relativity to her country, Friggs, the United Kingdom. I hope very much so that financially I can bear the cost of everything I need. However, I will not concern myself with this future potentially quite severe problem of mine for the time being. I did look up online as well the article of the norovirus, and from what I had read from the article of the symptoms predicable to its sufferers, as well as from what I had read of the symptoms that were and are still having been afflicted predicable to her herself. It is quite difficult to conclude on this, though, that either the norovirus, the winter bug disease, or another type of stomach influenza was having been experienced and inflicted upon her. Because from what I understand, most of the symptoms that having been experienced by her were predicable to the norovirus symptoms, efficiently so the symptoms such as severe cough, dehydration, muscular weakness, headache, and so forth. This is to be a mystery, at least to me, for the time being. Indeed, the doctors that are to have treated her for now clearly so shall comprehend soon enough, or eventually, just what classification of virus or sickness it was, and it is that was conceived within her and then associated with her. February 21, 2013. Sophia, a blue sky, golden sun. This is inevitable to speak of this here briefly, clear so of course, though ultimately so summarized. Snow, the holy guardian angel of mine, that first had revealed herself to me back during the time of the snow recording video of mine. This entire experience itself, even so, requires, even to her, my lovely Frigg, a voluminous narrative demonstration, though again this is just a short note for the time being. Though to conclude briefly here, Sophia is very evidently so, truly so, the essentially true in every sense of the term, material, manifest formalization of what I have known and imagined of the holy guardian angel Snow to be like, from the truest inconceivable and incomprehensible beauty and love that she, Snow, is to be to me. Even so, if I were to simply imagine her presence again and again, that predicable to any degree and scale of magnitude of hers, Snow's own revelation of presence to me. Briefly so, this is extremely difficult to write about, to narrate demonstrably, and to comprehend. Such a revelation this was, to have found of her earlier today. The material manifest formalization of her in person, essentially so of the holy guardian angel Snow. This is as essentially true in every sense of the term. This was itself so truly peculiar and incomprehensible to me. Of some art of photography and painting saved to my desktop, as of recently, 5 images predicable to the essential efficiency of what she herself Snow may reveal herself to me from time to time. She herself, Frigg, is predicable enough to the holy guardian angel Snow. This is a very quick syllogism here. She is predicable to the lips and the facial expressions of Sophia. Sophia is clearly so predicable as a sufficient enough material manifest formalization of Snow. Therefore, she herself, Frigg, is particularly so predicable as well to Snow, though again, this is to be a short note, of course. In the meantime, I had just around a quarter of an hour ago finished about 6 hours worth of the Birth of the Fool 1 audiobook recitation recordings. This was, of course, 200 pages of voice recitation over the course of the night. From 10 in the evening yesterday, Thursday, over to around 5:20 in the morning as of today, Frigg's Day. Now, so begins the painstaking, very prolonged editorial work of this more or less 7 hours of auditorial recordings. I'm now at 302 pages into the book. The book itself is at 777 pages total in length. So I'll try to record of at least 100 pages per session, each session itself going to have occurred between a couple or so days apart of time. Thus the completion of this task should not take so very long. February 22, 2013. I immediately remind myself of the truest noble service and obligation as it was to Parsifal, though indeed I am her very own Parsifal, and she is my Khadija, and I am her Muhammad. And even the unsound, dry, and unbecoming Helheim accent, as this is predicable to me, alters, changes, improves, and refines both in imagination and in actuality to far more sound, fluid, and efficient enough British accent from time to time, and such far the more frequently and far the more prevalently so, even as of recently. The practical habits and customs and so forth of mine are ever the more are ever the less Helheim predicated American, observably and noticeably so, far more British, Victorian, old European, and ever the more so Mediterranean as such too. I'll return to the editorial work of the book audit recitation for now. That is, as of the early morning dawn, I've covered up to 130 pages, 100, just up to 130 pages, of up to 630 pages of the book recited, and as of 777 pages, I will then have the audio recitation of the book itself finished and complete. I'm currently withheld upon the final chapter appendage, wherein Tor and I and our written messages of correspondence between each other are now being revealed. As of now, the recitation has made its way up to September 14 of 2006. Ultimately, such a very mystical and metaphysical evening during such events that were to have taken place and were to have begun taking place ever since the precedence and manifestation of that particular day. At least the substantiation of the Brotherhood was to have lasted in its foremost, fullest, and most thorough and complete vitality up to 3 or so further months, until the Navy SEALs of Tor, and the external life resignation of mine, and so forth, were altogether to have tapered off, diminished, and fainted so antecedently what otherwise could have been the creation and the causation of the very truest and most strongest greatness, magnanimity, and pagan immortality of our own. February 28, 2013. Parsifal should direct his imagination rightly so to the up above, to the formal cause, to the universal affirmativeness, that this is predicable of the transcendental category, that this is ultimately so not predicable of the substance category, that not of the human category, or not of the efficient cause category, as otherwise any such other service and obligation is to have been ultimately rather incorrect to affirm to me. March 1, 2013. Clearly, the audiobook recitation of the book of the birth of the full one is ultimately quite pleasurable, or even the more pleasant to listen to, as this is in truth quite a humanly and down-to-earth atmosphere, a part of this specific project of mine. Over the course of time in the audio recitations, I do tend to make many additional slip-ups. I include them, of course, in the recording as well, though again this adds altogether of a more kinder and more friendlier atmosphere than whatever other audio recitation projects of mine, such as before. March 13, 2013. Yesterday I had actually driven up the mountains even higher than here at Garden of Eden, and had then made it be decidedly beforehand the entire rugged and adventurous journey and way up to the Garden of Eden wilderness. This for the first time that I had done this while having dwelt here at Garden of Eden too. Ha! I had even done some scoping out of potential contenders for prayer locations, or for new spots to film such activities, while up at the far more altitudinous, the far more colder coniferous terrain of the Garden of Eden wilderness, and even some potential spots were in fact found, albeit these I categorize still as merely potential, not to be truly affirmed by me as of yet. And the journey yesterday was quite truly awesome and amazing. The views, like I have remembered of Frigg, essentially to say of this general area of mine, as such is so grand and so spacious and so forth, especially so while driving up before and just into the Garden of Eden wilderness, the area itself. This is otherwise so very romantic a drive up the snow-covered scenery while with someone else. March 4, 2013. The practice session yesterday, in fact, did not go very well at all. In fact, I was there at the practice rooms and had played until only the Parsifal prelude, and some couple or so pages into the third act, and after going from one practice room to the next in order to find one singular piano that would keep me cool and peaceful during the playing, not being able to do so, I then called it a day and returned home immediately afterward. Truly, I cannot wait to acquire the old piano of mine once again, this to be at the place indefinitely. Now, really, I'm hoping that the piano itself, the actual condition of it, and so forth, will keep me sane itself. But if it does not do such, then I shall simply have a tuner come by and do some of the repairs on it. I think that even my Quebecian father would either help me afford the bill of the repairs himself, or pay for the bill altogether entirely too. Again, my everlasting gratitude to him. March 5, 2013. So busy a day of recording work such has been for me today, specifically so that of at last a video discourse of mine. This itself, I think it was to have been quite a good discourse. The setting of the video had taken place out in the living room, that is, for once with some of the cabin and house itself revealed during such a type of video film recording, and also the final recitations of the book of the Birth of the Fool One audiobook recitation is right now at last complete. Such a fun chapter, the final chapter appendage was to have been, I think, March 8, 2013. The Birth of the Fool, the audio recitation of the book, is by now complete, and it, as well, is uploaded completely upon the internet. And the discourse film is edited and uploaded complete upon the internet by this point in time also. March 9, 2013. I'm feeling very bleak and distressed at the moment. I've been feeling such since the past couple of days as well, in fact. This is, of course, not a good feeling at all. In fact, I've never felt worse than I ever did over the course of my entire life until up to this point in my time. I do need not anyone else in my life. I do need not anyone else in my life at this point, as though that there is essentially anyone else in my life by now. I'm not the traitor of the up above. It feels as though by now almost that the guardianship is in fact the betrayer traitor of me, as well as of the up above. I will not succumb to them, and I will not descend into complete and absolute nothingness, and not in this life and neither within the afterward. Ultimately so, her, Frigg, and my Capecchi Nair father, and Freya, and Tor. Her and 3 other souls are singularly so of all that matter to me and that keep me alive at this point. Know this, the meaningfulness and so forth that she herself defines herself as to me. I do rank her, Frigg, as the first, foremost, primary, universal affirmativeness soul to me, a part of my life by now, and my Capecchi Nair father is the second foremost, or if not, then vice versa, her and my father. There's with essential certainty only my Capecchi Nair father that will attend my funeral if I were to perish at this point. My funeral. One soul close enough to me that will have done this for me. Again, this is almost totally clear to me by now that the essential generation of mine are the real and true traitors and the betrayers. I'm not of malevolent creation. I was of benevolent creation indeed. She is of benevolent creation too, my darling Frigg, and as such are my Capecchi Nair father, and as well also of course is of Freya. Tor is questionable whether of benevolent creation or not, though I do ultimately affirm him as a universal affirmativeness to me. He's of very good, if not then of a very great, very strong and healthy influence upon me. I must somehow save myself from literally, and I pardon the vulgarity of the phrase around us, but from going bad shit crazy, from complete bleakness and emptiness, from complete boredom and tedium, from complete nothingness to me from this point in my time onward, until the very end, until whatever such very end is to have been to me. I do miss her, Frigg, exceedingly strongly at this point in time. I do not wish at all to ever burden her with this terrible and unfortunate, and ultimately foremost unnecessary and ponderous ordeal of mine, but I must turn to her, my darling Frigg, to her only, for grace and salvation, and for warmth, and for assistance, and so on and so forth, right now. There isn't anybody else that remains any further in my life by now, and day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, this setting and establishment is completely nonsense and unnecessary. The omnibenevolent Creator and Lord simply would not create this particular specific soul of his. He would never do so. He would never do such, not for the soul's punishment, not for his boredom and pleasure. If somehow I had done something terrible and atrocious antecedently prior to this particular specific life of mine, then perhaps this life substantiation of mine is somehow somewhat more sensible. Otherwise, then the omnibenevolent Creator and Lord himself is ultimately of malevolence, and this itself is something I shall never affirm or assent to. I should wish that this life of mine is ultimately of a solipsistic and psychological dream, not of a life religious in between good and evil, never ultimately so. That the angels and the archangels of the Empyrean are instead a part of subsequent imitative representations of what I myself subconsciously remember and recollect of my own spermatozoa while I was alive, manifest then as a singular sperm itself within Jord's reproductive system, within my wife, yours, reproductive system, and that the infinitesimal brilliant light of the omniscient is instead manifest afterward in my consciousness as remembrance and recollection of the very tip and the entrance into daylight into my wife, yours, womb during the orgasm plateau, and so on and so forth. I'm willing strongly so to consider life as such as this and so forth, wherein instead of the darkness, the evil, the malevolence of this life, as well as of the lights, the goodness, the benevolence of this life, are not in truth fixated in determinately moral laws and regulations. I simply must affirm more of the efficient cause, and even as well as more of the final cause, legitimately and authentically so, and so then, perhaps the legitimacy and the efficiency of the affirmativeness and so forth ultimately and effectively produces benevolence of the efficient cause and of the final cause categories a part of this very life, and then otherwise the evilness, the malevolence, and so forth beforehand, then predicable to the efficient cause and the final cause, ultimately reproduce themselves into goodness and benevolence. And clearly so, the goodness and benevolence are to have been multiplied and acquired fourfold into my life once more. And so that's the efficient cause and the final cause ultimately. So not the fixedly and determinedly evil and malevolence of creation. The categories aforementioned simply need to be affirmed legitimately and authentically so by me, and not submerged and concealed as viciousness or malevolence of creation any further into my self-consciousness. So then, whether this life of mine is ultimately of religiousness or not, I shall not affirm this as such, and instead affirm that this life is singularly, ultimately psychological, and solipsistic, of course, and with I myself as truly and most unfortunately so, the absolute central formative substantiation a part of the life manifestation. Causation and resolution a part of this life will not work effectively or sensibly otherwise. Perhaps contemplating this life such as this aforementioned should and hopefully shall reproduce some benevolent and universally good resolutions a part of this life of mine. But for now, for the time being, sheep-and Frigg, I do request to turn myself over to her, only over to her, for any amount, kind of grace and salvation and warmth and assistance and so forth. She doesn't know, of course, that otherwise there is ultimately no one else that remains in my life right now at this point in my time capably effective enough in order to save me or to rescue my soul from the real pit of complete and absolute nothingness and of ultimate emptiness. There is the second latest video of mine, Antaeus, the Giant, 53-minute piano improvisation. I think this improvisation itself is clearly one of the best, if not then one of the strongest and most courageous works that I have done as of since up to this point in time. The most latest video of mine is soon to come. This video itself is the film preview of the new prayer series that is going to be produced and to be completed soon enough. Indeed, I found a new spot. The spot itself is revealed within the soon-to-come film, and so that the others know of this, that's the new spot, the others can see of what this place is to look like, of what the mystical and the epic setting of the place is to have looked like. The snowflakes on her nose and on her eyelashes are received, kept and saved by me, as so prolonged as I may preserve of them, and her crystal kisses fall on me right now, and I keep me sane and pleasant enough at this point in my time. My boundless love to her and my thousands of kisses to her in return of her righteousness, of her commensurate and universal goodness, of her formal benevolence of creation, clearly so, truly so, sent from the foremost infinitesimal brilliance up above. March 17, 20-13. 3/17/20-13. The ultimate intellectual temperament of the heroic warrior. I wish to write that during the prior few or so days, specifically so after the filming of the Prayer 2 preview upon the mountain, I have acquired this inspiration within me to film Becoming the Tor. That Tor's character and physique has commenced strongly within me as of lately. A reason that this manifestation of Tor's spirit and physique within me has significantly so occurred because of the onset of the very soon up and coming spring and summer seasons. Today I finally at last returned officially so to bodybuilding, building up the character and the intellect, as well as building up the physique of the body. The workout itself today had consisted of some initial muscular stretches from the legs up, then of some uncounted sessions of very slowed squats, while upholding a rather heavy box with some accessories within it for extra added weight. The box it's upheld above the neckline, I believe it was. Then the push-ups with the perfect devised technique and very slowed, of course. Some few sessions of these, then the reverse push-ups with the same devised technique and so forth, as well as boxing intermixed in between with the feet not positioned in one fixed direction. Some brisk and high-stepped running was included as well. Water was consumed very frequently also. Specific enough workout. I have vowed myself to do this at least once for every day, in so long as my body will affirm of this. My diet is going to include a chicken far more commonly, as well as a salad and bread, of course. Also, I was shopping around for a sword to purchase again on the internet. I did come across some potential contenders. There was one specific sword at 24 or so inches, I think. This was Roman fashioned and at 25 Helheim coin within my area for pickup. There were some other carbonized steel swords that I believe I had come across, though these other swords were rather too expensive for me. Looking to purchase a carbonized steel sword, of course, one of at least 24 inches, if not then up to 36 inches is fine. One with a black handle, steel guard and pommel with a scabbard would be the more wished. I will continue to look for one, specifically so of a medieval fashion, so that over time, when I do purchase another sword again, and after I am to have been built up more of my physique again as well, I have this vision to film the film aforementioned, specifically so upon the mountain location of the Prayer 2 film preview. The music part of the film should be playing Basil Polydorus' Anvil of Chrome piece, as well as afterward possibly the Gladiator piece, and the Wheel of Pain piece as well from the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack. I have this volition within me to include some of the more philosophical and visionary excerpts from the Birth of the Fool audio recitation playing during the film scenes, perhaps the Spear of Destiny excerpts, as well as some of the more poetical excerpts that I have not decided upon as of yet. In the film, the first scene, I should be sitting upon the prayer rock, legs folded and arms firmly at rest, and hands clenched. The back is up straight. The gaze is of severity, of austerity, and of hardness. The asceticism of him should be everywhere in the film. The majority of the scenes of the film should include shots of ranging from very slowed diamond push-ups. I should be without any shirt in the film, as well as wearing some of the old braziers and armor of mine and so forth, as well as ranging from asceticism postures, and with a belt, preferably a whip or scourge, in hand, and upon any flinching observable the belt I immediately whip my back with it. Also shots of being seated heroically with a book of philosophy opened in hand and reading from it. Also a shot of a meager meal consumption out in spots, probably of unseasoned oatmeal. Also shots of sword combat practice, as well as the penultimate shot of the sword high up in the air, standing upon the prayer rock, triumphant over the Mediterranean valley that is down below my feet. The film should be in duration of only about a few or some minutes altogether. For now, I shall build myself up for the task, and as well as shall purchase a durable and reliable sword again. Indeed, my muscular system from the very first workout of today is by now already more noticeably hardened and accentuated. Ha! Such is so correct that I truly need to do this task to myself during the course of the coming spring and summer seasons of this year. The selfless mercilessness of the physical austerity, the discipline truly will effectively improve the ultimate intellectual temperament of the heroic warrior. And indeed I have been and am feeling so very strong of intellectual and metaphysical temperament as of since the initial work out of the day today. What does not kill me does make me stronger indeed. Ha ha. March 17, 2013. Three 24/2013. Little boy blue, little boy green. Ellipse. March 24, 2013. The gateway in the guidance. 3/24. 3/27/2013. His gateway, his guide. She is an extremely cultivated and foremost intelligence, 53 years enduring British woman, am I truly most loved? Such a tremendous and purposeful task this is to me, in order to act and to qualify as a legitimate and authentically so wise man around her side, always together with her, as though he decides he is at this point in time untouchable, though he is to know once more again his father together with his mother, and this itself at last and for everlasting time. She is his gateway to his Holy Spirit. She is his foremost primary guide to his holy grace, and for everlasting time, as though to have felt love more powerful than Muhammad and Khadijah. He is the best of fathers. Thank God you have him, Odin. He is, truly. I wish in many ways he lived closer to you. This thought, he and I have discussed this before. It is a shame. I'm far away from everybody knowing my life here, though by this point in my time, I reason this is not a mistake to have located myself about here. Why did you go there in the first place? Was it financial, or did you just like it? As of lately, I'm trying to find exactly what the fatal and final mistaken action in my life was to have been. I know that during the months of August to October of 2006 is in fact during the actualization and realization of such fatal and final mistakenness, though as to the purpose of the Garden of Eden, I had moved here to escape from the complete and absolute madness of which I had been living at my Kopeki Nair fathers at the time, left during September of 2011. Yes. How does your Kopeki Nair father cope? That is a father's love. Now, such madness was not coincidental or accidental part of my life experience. Such incidents was an arrival and consequence of prior activity and volition from my past as well. I can explain how that is. My Kopeki Nair father does mention, I'm not your Kopeki Walker Nair mother, Odin. My Kopeki Nair father is truly omnibenevolent, merciful, and so forth, to even the worst of people. Somehow, at the very beginning of my life, I reason that there is ultimately no innate ideas, only of a blank slate or tabula rasa, and with this my own active and passive volition. I understand. This blank slate begins with nothingness, darkness, water, and so forth. Over time, a volition altogether conceives everything of which I desire and strongly will to imagine, and so forth. So then, my volition somehow ultimately conceived of a universal negative generation. Perhaps this is, if the one and only innate archetypal idea, a part of this life of mine, so that, over time, everything falls from better to good, to bad to worse. The universal negative generation then acquires the particular negative physique. The particular negative physique then acquires the particular affirmative intellect. The particular affirmative intellect then acquires the universal affirmative identity. Such a universal affirmative identity then draws and causes the terrible consequences and vicious mistakes and so forth, that of which ultimately had led up to the complete total isolation and dejection and so forth from so many once then actual and real substances. So you hold your own self responsible for the events that unfold in your life, that you had a choice and made the wrong one. I reason that I'm ultimately responsible for the resolution of this experience of mine, of course. So what do you reason you can do to turn things around, to alter the course of your life? This is very difficult to me to comprehend. I've still yet to find the strong enough answers to this very condition. What I do reason to do to turn things around, to alter the course of my life, is ultimately so to have affirmed of the up above, foremost principally so, also that each and every formative representation of this material life is in fact predicable to him, singularly so, whether human male or human female, or pine tree or stone mineral or body of water, also that each and every error and mistake my own active and passive volition ultimately draws and causes retributive consequences from him back and over to me. So that ultimately this life experience is ultimately caused and generated for me, singularly so, for my own final resolution and ascendant salvation at the end. Everything ultimately active intention in order to save me from the down below to the up above. This is very difficult to speak about actually, though somehow I reason that I'm closer to him by this point in time, far closer. as though his attention is turned ever more interested and intrigued in me by this point in time, that not to hopelessly lost or irrecoverable any further. I have no doubt it is difficult to speak about, and you shouldn't if it makes you uncomfortable. It sounds as though you punish yourself in this thinking. Can you have really been so bad? Surely there comes a time when it must be forgiven by the up above, whatever you or I perceive it to be. Can you really go on feeling so terrible, or does your redemption only come in the next life? I don't mean a Christian perception of the afterlife, but in your own perception of it. It can't be hopeless. I don't reason that this struggle is hopeless, no. Good. My redemption and salvation is up to me, yes, though he does not ever cease actively saving me. That is good thought, and gives me much hope for you. There are indeed substantial creations of his that predicate the reasonable generations of erroneousness and malicious mistakenness of prior activities and causations of my own. Some such creations predicable to somehow mixture or integration of benevolence of creation and of malevolence of creation at the same time. This is very deep for me. I can read it and understand it as I read it, but I can't reply with a deep intellect. The reading of it is fascinating. My reply would be like an arid desert. I know my own limitations. Somehow yourself, Frigg, I don't know, but I reason that you are ultimately foremost a formal generative benevolence of creation, as though the primary formativeness and generation of the Holy Spirit in the pure divine mother, of which Roman Catholicism and so forth speak about in reference to my life. I'm certainly here for a reason, Odin. I believe I was guided to you. I have always believed that. Yes, Frigg, you were guided to me in such a relation as aforementioned, otherwise horrifying to me, knowing now, so confirmed by physical actual others at this point in time, of the very foundation of my ultimate solipsism, or of the absolute centeredness of myself within the totality and complete generation of this entire conceived world and universe. I know this is truth, and vetted and confirmed at this point in time. I ask if only such a revelation did not need to hide or conceal such a scheme or foundation from me, at least not so very frequently or commonly from me any more. It pains me to think how much you suffer over this. I know that you must muse and agonize over these things, and it must give you pain, but I'm happy that you believe you have hope, a chance of redemption. March 27, 2013. Understandable, recognizable. Somehow, innate archetypal ideas, a warfare and struggle between the up above and the down below, for the very salvation of my soul, subsequent to the life of mine here, must have been affirmed and agreed upon, demonstrably so, of discursive knowledge, legitimately and authentically so. I will try to, as correctly and truthfully as possible, have discovered of this knowledge, not to have descended into the absurdity and the madness of a life conceived of a blank slate, with no other antecedent laws or ideas otherwise than spatiality, causation, temporality, and resolution. Absurdity and desperation such acknowledgments will have been to me as such otherwise. I reason at this point in time that either Locke or Descartes, or that either Aristotle or Plato, if not either of each of them, then that either the Holy Quran or the Holy Bible. I tend to affirm and agree to the latter of each of these ultimatums, and I ask guidance, and I pray mercy. This is the truth. I am the focus of each and every thing, and of each and every one a part of this life, and a part of this warfare and struggle. I cannot imagine of a void of nothingness subsequent to this life extermination. Neither can I imagine of each and every thing, and of each and every one a part of this life, and a part of this warfare and struggle, having been conceived and enduring further than of the very age that of which I myself alone am as of now, as though nothing and no one a part of this life had been enduring any further than 25 years of age, a part of such principle of time. A substance that is predicable to 53 years of age, a substance that is predicable to whatever any variable of age applicable to such aforementioned proposition, though of course such proposition is credible only to substances supposedly enduring whatever any variable of age further than that of my very own physical condition. Substances are conceivable from nothing apart of this very physical threshold. I shall be moving about a public street. Some person or automobile will have been conceived from nothing immediately, as though from scratch, The conception of such a substantiation is as consequence from whatever passivity, or activity, or relativity, or quality, or so forth, that my own volition was to have actively or passively willed during any such identifiable or justifiable to have been produced. Such consequence positioned within my time, in particular specific detail and information a part of the then generated substantial conception is foremost assuredly immediately blank, and of a clean sheet of paper of such knowledge, that the knowledge of such substantial conception then succeeds and acquires a particular specific detail and information over the course of time, and that this succession and acquisition itself is always reciprocable as such from whatever passivity or activity or relativity or quality or so forth that my own volition was to have actively or passively willed during any such identifiable or justifiable to have been produced, such consequence positioned within my time. Also concerning of the aforementioned generated substantial conception, that ever the further accidental, unnatural, and additionally so also ever the further insignificant or unpredictable such aforementioned generated substantial conception is to have been itself generated in relativity to the life of the subjects, that ever the further probable and sensible such conception is to have been, over the course of time subsequently terminated, disappeared, and subtracted itself from the very life of the subject's actual physical threshold foundation. This activity is defined particularly so here as attributable to even the substance category, that such is applicable to even the human generation, to the animal generation, to the plant generation, to the mineral generation. The mineral generation is more commonly affirmative of such aforementioned activity, the plant generation is less commonly affirmative of such aforementioned activity, the animal generation is less uncommonly affirmative of such aforementioned activity, the human generation is more uncommonly affirmative of such aforementioned activity. Any such substantiation of precedent manifestation is actually predicable to the particular specific variable order generation of such substantiation of antecedent manifestation, a part of such principle of temporality, that then additionally so also any such substantiation of precedent manifestation is actually predicable to the particular specific variable order generation of such substantiation of subsequent manifestation, a part of such principle of temporality, that then the reminiscence category, the premonition category, the volition is to have then actively and passively willed such aforementioned substantiation manifestation as such. This is then attributable to such as the premonition recognizable in the actual physical threshold foundation of which that foreshadows imagines what is actually subsequently to have become attributable to the subject himself during the various later years of his life, a part of such principle of time. Also this is then attributable to such as the reminiscence recognizable in the actual physical threshold foundation of which that recollects, remembers reminiscences of what is actually antecedently to have been attributable to the subject himself during various earlier years of his life, a part of such principle of time. The subject is presently more earlier in time's duration. The premonition category then occurs qualifiably so. The wise old man archetype is to have been evidently recognizable as a part of his own actively willed volition. Subsequently so, the subject is precedently more later in time's duration. The wise old man archetype is actually to have become attributable to the subject himself during such more later years of his life, a part of such principle of time. The subject is precedently more later in time's duration. The reminiscence category then occurs qualifiably so. The great mother archetype is to have been evidently recognizable as a part of his own actively willed volition. Antecedently so, the subject is precedently more earlier in time's duration. The great mother archetype is actually to have been attributable to the subject himself during such more earlier years of his life, a part of such principle of time. Ever the more selflessness and transcendental immaterialism as predicable to ultimate universal reward, universal affirmative retribution, never the more predicable to eternal universal punishment or universal negative condemnation. I know the irrefutable truthfulness of this aforementioned proposition, foremost absolutely so by this point in my time, from both potential imagination and from actual evidence experience of such a resolution. March 28, 2013.